So welcome to today's session. We're going to be focusing on specifically Ayurveda for yoga teachers. And I'm going to leave you with 5 practices, principles, things to consider to incorporate Ayurvedic principles into either your home yoga practice. Maybe you're not a yoga teacher and you're totally welcome to be here if that's the case. And I know that many of you are yoga teachers and are interested in Ayurveda. Perhaps have even studied Ayurveda with myself or elsewhere. And these principles that I'm speaking about today are reminders and things to begin to consider and deepen in your understanding and in your sensitivity as you go through your own day-to-day life, and also as you are creating your classes or creating your home practice. So my name is Melanie Phillips, also known as Mudra. You can call me either of those things. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a clinical Ayurvedic specialist. I'm an author. I'm a Panchakarma specialist and an energy healer, studied in many various forms of energy healing. And today I really support my clients working at resolving or dissolving the limited perceptions and beliefs that are stored in the subconscious mind. So this ties in with Ayurveda because in Ayurveda, we understand that all dis-ease has its roots in a mental / emotional arena on an energetic plane. So we could get lofty and talk about samskaras and karmas, and we won't today for the purpose of this class and this session. However, until we really look underneath, even beyond all of the beauty of Ayurveda and what it teaches us about food practices and eating according to our dosha and the dinacharya, the daily routine according to our dosha and the time of year and the rhythms of nature, beyond all of that, this is wonderful and essential. And if we do not begin to go deeper into the pranic body, deeper into the subconscious limiting perceptions and beliefs, the pranic body, we won't get the traction, we won't get the transformation that I believe we're all genuinely seeking on some level, which is moksha, which is the freedom to live in this human body, this annamaya kosha, this food body, with health, with ease, with joy. And as we know from yoga and our yogic studies, all the layers of the koshas, we need to address those in our health and our healing. We can't just focus on the physical and our food and our dinacharya. We can't just focus on the mental or just the emotional bodies. We need to look holistically at our whole self. And so that's the work that I support my clients to do. It's what I support my students in the Ayurvedic Yoga Teacher Training. And it's also what I work with in my students and participants in the mentorship programs that I offer. And I will talk a little bit more. There's been some questions that have come in about the upcoming 100-hour training. So today is an opportunity. I'll tell you a little bit more about what that looks like. You can ask questions about that. But before that, I want to offer some things to consider in the realm of Ayurveda. So mindfulness, when I wrote 5 tips to mindfully incorporate Ayurveda into our yoga practice. What I know from teaching yoga teacher trainings for many years at Langara College was that students would go through these 200, 250 hours, ours was yoga trainings, kind of get blown wide open, entering a training, not thinking, most people think, oh, yoga is asana. Some people come in through the door of meditation. Many of the people are like, I want to learn how to teach asana. And then they get into this teacher training and realize there's this philosophy and there's, the yamas, the niyamas, there's this ancient history, there's the Vedas, there's all of these components that is so massive to try and unravel and try and digest in relatively a short period of time. And Ayurveda is often one of these components that is maybe brought in for a 2-hour segment of the of the yoga teacher training. And the students get a little bit like curious and interested. So what I decided after teaching years of yoga teacher training and seeing that either the teachers would go out into the real world. Hi, Azalea. The teachers would go out into the real world and either run themselves ragged and get themselves stressed out and completely imbalanced, and try and either make a career out of teaching yoga or have it as a side hustle or a side hobby, and begin to create more imbalance and disturbance in their own health and their life. And it's like, we can't have this. So I feel so passionate about teaching Ayurveda specifically to yoga teachers and dedicated students of yoga, because we cannot separate yoga and Ayurveda. They're sister sciences. They're two sides of the same coin. Yoga is ultimately about expanding consciousness. It is about self-actualization. That is the path of yoga, the yoking, the yog, to yoke the individual and the universal consciousness. That's what the word yoga literally means, that beautiful union. And we cannot dismiss that we're in a physical body and that we have to take care of this physical body. So Ayurveda, the science of life, gives us, teaches us, allows us to understand how to keep this Annamaya kosha in the most optimal state of health, so that we can dive deeper into our spiritual practice, so that we can meditate, so that we can do our asana, pranayama, mudra, bandha, so that we can be fully present in our life. As we all have experienced it at different times, I'm sure, if we're unwell, if we feel sick, if we feel not okay in our physical body, it is much harder, not impossible, but much more difficult to sit down and still the mind, or to meditate, or to be connected to our vertical, I call it, that center, that home state within us. So if we have a vikruti, if we have a current state that is out of balance, it is much more difficult to be in the magnificence of our life and to see and perceive through a lens of clarity. So when the physical body is not healthy, it is much harder to connect to ourself, to our higher self, from a place of clarity, from a place of deep intimacy, without the fear, anxiety, overwhelm that can sometimes accumulate when our physical body is not well, because we are so self-identified with the physical. So 5 things to consider. There are way more, but I'm just choosing 5 to focus on for today. The first thing to consider when you're creating your classes, and I know all of you are going to be working with different styles of yoga, whether it's hatha yoga, flow yoga, vinyasa yoga, hot yoga, restorative yoga, like all the yogas that we have now, right? All of these different labels and subcultures of yoga practice. What I'm most interested in is process and end result. So what is the process? What is the journey that you're taking and guiding your students through? And what is the end result of that? Which is essentially, what is the state of their nervous system? So we want to think about, what is the end result of this personal practice I'm doing, or class? Do I want to feel invigorated, stimulated, awake, juiced up, jacked up? Do I want to feel calm, steady, balanced? What is the end result that I'm looking to create? And in essence, reverse engineer that, instead of simply randomly throwing a bunch of postures together that maybe it's a cute little sequence, or maybe that's what we learned, or maybe some teacher taught it and we thought that was cool, or we just simply don't know why we're doing certain asana that we're doing. And that's fair enough. We haven't always been taught the energetics behind each of the postures. I studied at the Bihar School of Yoga in India, and they have a beautiful, powerful book that I think every yoga teacher should have. It's sort of the yogic Bible. It's an orange book. It's called Asana, Pranayama, Mudra, Bandha. It's a very simple book. It breaks down many of the asana and looks at what is the energetic or spiritual connection to that posture. What are we doing in the pranic body in that physical position? Because it's not about the physical form, the physical shape. So if we're wanting to work on Swadhisthana chakra, for example, we need to understand which asana are going to support that. And then we go, oh, well, Swadhisthana chakra, that second energy centers related to which element? To the water element. So Appa, water, is connected to this second chakra, this lower back, the reproductive tissue and organs. And when we understand, oh, well, if I'm working on bringing balance to that energy inside of myself, maybe we're working with the energy of guilt, and we understand, oh, that's second chakra is often where guilt can get stored, or feeling unsupported, and then we get lower back pain. And we understand energetically, psycho-emotionally, which energy center is related to which posture. Then we have more skill in deciding which postures we're going to choose for a medicinal effect. Does that make sense? So yes, it can be that I'm just going to do this posture because it feels good, and we can work intuitively in that way, and we can deeply listen into letting our body guide our movements. And I highly encourage that. Most people are a few steps away from their practice or their teaching being in that form. So the understanding, the intellectual understanding of the postures related to the elements, which postures are going to increase, which postures are going to decrease, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, is supportive, is beneficial. So I want you to think about, what is the end result of my practice or my class? What feeling state do I want my students to walk out of the room with? And you'll see why in a moment with some of the other principles, why that clear intention of what energy you're creating or guiding your students through is so crucial. It's not just, we don't want it to be left up to chance or to random experience. And yes, every student will have a different experience, but the more skilled you are in understanding the asana, the pranayama, the mudra, the bandha, and the cause and effect, essentially the karma of those practices, then you're going to choose practices that are more relative and more healing. For individual, it's always easier than a class, because we understand, well, we've got all of these different doshas. We have people of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha nature all jumbled in one class. How do we satisfy? How do we offer a class that brings balance to all of these different doshic states? And that's really what you learn in the 100-hour Ayurvedic yoga training, is a deeper understanding of Ayurveda as the foundation, as the backbone. And then it makes a lot more sense when you go into create classes, working one-on-one with students, all of that. It makes a lot more sense, because you go, I know why now I'm suggesting these practices for that individual or for the class. Now, yoga was traditionally taught guru to disciple, one-on-one. It wasn't like, here, let's stuff 50 people in a room and get them jumping around together. The student of yoga would go, and the guru might say, okay, here are these 3 practices. You go away for a year, do these, come back, and we'll talk. We'll see what's happened, right? I was talking to a family member on the phone today who was asking for some health advice. What can I do for high blood pressure? And so, me knowing or thinking that I know this family member, I gave them 2 pieces of advice, which they may not like. The 2 pieces of advice, and it's all very individualized, right? This is not the advice I would give to everybody that comes to me with high blood pressure, but for this specific individual, I said, stop complaining and stop binge eating ice cream. Go away, do that. If you do that, when you do that, come back to me, let's talk. I'm not going to give you 30 recommendations to entertain your mental gymnastics with you not implementing any of them. So let's get really honest about it. Go away, practice that, come back, let me know. Did you do that? Did you think about that? Did you work in any way on that? 1%, 2%, 50%, doesn't matter, but is there an investment in the transformation? And so can we, bit by bit, start to make these changes, instead of thinking we just have to get all of the information and we log all the information up here, but nothing gets embodied or little gets embodied. What I think we're wanting to do, and hopefully you'll agree, is become more skillful humans, not perfect humans, not even better humans, just more skillful in our attentiveness and in our kindness to self. How compassionate can I be? How kind can I speak to myself? And how can that be expressed through my practice or through my teaching, where I no longer need to force, where I no longer need to be self-punishing or self-critical? Because as we integrate the true teachings of yoga, of Ayurveda, then we have a different relationship to our inner landscape and our outer landscape. And Ayurveda is about the understanding of our inner and outer landscapes through the lens of the 5 elements. Okay, so we've talked about the end result for our class or practice. So we want to go in with intention. How do I want to feel at the end? The second point, which is interrelated to this completely, is the state of the nervous system. I go on about this in the teacher training because I believe that everything comes back to the state of our nervous system. And then we have higher planes that directs the nervous system. So we can think about our state of awareness that is giving information that the nervous system is translating, is communicating. So we need to go to the level of awareness, the level of subconscious. The subconscious mind is taking up, is the behind the scenes force of 95% of our behaviors, 95% of our thought process, our sensations, our life. Subconscious. Only 5, it's even said 2 to 5% is the conscious mind. So until we're willing to slow down enough to notice when we get triggered, to notice what takes us out of balance, to notice, oh, I'm way out of balance, and that started 3 days ago, or that started 20 minutes ago. I could feel it coming, and I ignored the signs, the signals, and kept on going in my usual programmed way. We get to pause, check in, and I invite you right now, check in for a moment. What is the state of your nervous system right now? Just as you're sitting here, perhaps listening to the words, but maybe the mind's also somewhere else, thinking about what's for dinner, thinking about what happened today, or that email that came in that you didn't like, or whatever it might be. But notice if you can tap into, touch into the vibrational tone of your nervous system right now. And then slow the breath down. Take a couple of deeper breaths. Let your face soften. Let your jaw release. The shoulders relax. Welcome that wave of ease down into the organs, down into the belly. Bring your energy from the external to the internal, back into your center line. And be with the breath. Be with the body in this present moment as the observer of, what is the state of this nerve system, of this energetic pulsation? Is it frantic? Is it smooth? In Ayurveda, we talk a lot about qualities, gunas. What is the quality of the food? What is the quality of the tone of voice? What is the quality of the nervous system? So if our nervous system feels frazzled, i.e. high vata, vata vitiation, then we use our wisdom and our skill to go, okay, I need to bring in qualities that are opposite to vata. Vata being dry, light, mobile, rough. We come to bring opposite qualities to balance that out. Okay, the third thing we want to consider is, what time of day is it? We should have a very different practice from morning to the evening to the afternoon. We don't want to be doing the exact same yoga practice or teaching the same yoga class at all times of day, because there is a cyclical rhythm. We've got vata, pitta, and kapha governing and cycling within a 24-hour period. So Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are highest at specific times of day, which I'll tell you those times of day in a moment. And it means that when that dosha is active, let's call it, at that time of day, it simply means that we're all being affected more by that energy. For example, the Pitta time of day, the fiery time of day, the hot, sharp, mobile, active time of day is 10 until 2 a.m. p.m. We know this is midday, and this is why in Ayurveda we say have your largest meal midday, because your internal sun, your Agni, your digestive fire is highest, strongest midday, just like the outer sun in the sky is most powerful midday. So we have a lot more heat, a lot more intensity, a lot more metabolic function during this Pitta time of day. That 10 to 2 in the evening is also the Pitta time of night. It's the time of night when the liver cleanses, when these Pitta organs get their detoxification if we are rested and sleeping. If we're awake during these times, the body will not detoxify. The organs will not have the opportunity to cleanse, to heal, to come back into their most optimal degree of functioning. If we're awake, if we're up on our computer, if we're watching Netflix, if we're, eating ice cream and up worrying about the state of the world, the state of all sorts of things, that will not allow us the time and space and alignment with the healing that occurs during that Pitta time of day. Often people get their second wind, right? Oh, I got my second wind. It's just Pitta time kicking in. This is why we recommend that people get to bed around 10 o'clock, because if you're up past that, you probably will feel this resurgence of energy and maybe start doing things and start getting stuff done or back to work on the computer, whatever it might be. And then that creates a cycle of depletion moving forward. So we have the Kapha time of day, 6 to 10 a.m. and p.m. Kapha being earth and water, heavy, slow, sluggish, dense qualities. So if you have a lot of Kapha in your constitution, or as an imbalance, mean excess Kapha, then it's this time of day, that heavy time of day, that it's going to serve you the best to get moving, to get exercising. In fact, for most people, this early morning is the best time to sweat. You don't have to sweat profusely, but that's a cleansing process when we gently sweat to cleanse and clear the toxins from the body. And that Kapha time of day, that early morning time, is typically going to be the best time for most people to do more vigorous exercise, where we don't want to be doing vigorous exercise or even dynamic vinyasa power flow at 6 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night. I know in Vancouver, in Canada, some yoga studios, had classes up until 10 o'clock at night when we had when we had real classes. So because we have more options, and because many of us have different irregular work schedules in this day and age than we would have maybe 50 years ago or 100 years ago, there's all of these options, and some of them can take us further and further out of balance. Even something as good as yoga, we think, well, yoga is healthy. Any kind of yoga is good for me. Not necessarily. Depends what practices we're doing. What time of day are we doing them in? Are we doing Kapalbhati at night? Stimulating, invigorating, when really that's going to be the time to do practices like alternate nostril breathing, Ujjayi, Pranayama, these practices to calm and center and steady. I can even feel it now. Right now, it's the Vata time of day. So 2 to 6 a.m. and p.m. is the Vata time of day. It's when the nervous system is more delicate, when the energy is lighter. So if we have a lot of Vata in our system, or we're working with a Vata imbalance, we're going to feel the lightness of that. For a lot of people, that translates as fatigue. That translates as overwhelm, of maybe feeling a little distracted or discombobulated. It's the time of day, that afternoon, where people's energy dips and they grab that third coffee or that piece of chocolate or a stimulant or something to kind of get them through the rest of the day, when it would be more helpful to do some vata pacifying practices at that time of day. So slow, calm, steady movement, maybe not talking, because we exert a lot of prana. We waste a lot of prana through speaking. I can feel it in my voice right now as my throat gets drier through the speech, through the talking. It increases and elevates vata dosha. So the 2 to 6 a.m. and p.m. is the time when many people, either they're dealing with this restlessness in their early morning sleep, they're not really resting because vata is light and it's disturbed easily, or that afternoon, as I just said, where there's too much fatigue or exhaustion and we just push through that. So when you think about, well, what time of day am I teaching my class? And what is going to bring balance? So the opposite qualities will bring balance. If it's a really heated time of day, it's a pitta time of day. We don't want to do super pitta aggravating practices, heated, intense, sharp, stimulating. That's going to amplify pitta, amplify heat. So we have to be very mindful of understanding what's the time of day and how is that going to interact with the practices that I'm doing or offering. Tied into that, or one more aspect to consider, is the time of year. So we have vata, pitta, and kapha times of year. Summertime, pitta time of year. Fall and early winter is the vata time of year. We see the trees, leaves start to fall off, they crumble and dry out, fall to the ground, change color. The same thing is happening internally, right? Our vata gets elevated in the fall and early winter. Things dry up, we get cold. This is often when stress and overwhelm feels super intense for many people. The winds of winter begin. And then we move into spring season. And this is the kapha time of year, the water time, the earth and water muddy time of year, when things literally, like we look outside now in Canada, it's coming into springtime. We're shifting out of the winter energy into that spring energy, where the ground softens, it becomes moister, but still muddy, still thick and heavy. So at this time of year, we're wanting to invigorate. It's typically a time of year that we do a cleanse, focusing on the pitta organs, like the liver, like the spleen. We detoxify the blood. This is a great time of year to bring more invigorating movement into our life, whether we get outside and go for a brisk walk or do more Surya Namaskar in our practice, or more Kapalbhati to keep things moving, to clear out the lungs, to clear out stagnation and heaviness that has accumulated through the winter time. I won't talk about food because that's a whole other thing, but I just want to leave it at that, of understanding that the season is going to adjust what practices we do as well. We should not be doing the same practices every single day of the year unless we're adjusting the approach, maybe the duration that we hold a pose, maybe the intention moving in and out of that pose, or the number of rounds or repetition, for example. So I think it's important to listen to our bodies above and beyond anything, above and beyond even what I'm sharing with you today, is that you are in your body. You're the one that knows your body the best out of anybody, and you're the most intimate with yourself. So you need to really respect where you're at. Maybe you're dealing with some symptoms or even dis-ease. So that has to be taken into consideration. It becomes challenging in these group classes to get it right for everybody. We can't, right? We won't be able to satisfy everybody's needs, but the more we understand about Ayurveda, I believe we can do it better. We can get it closer for more people, more medicinal for more of our students, than not understanding these rhythms of nature and how they're affecting us physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically. Okay. And then the fifth factor here is climate. So I'm talking about, from my perspective, Vancouver in the middle of winter, it's cool, it's damp, it's rainy, it's sort of this weird mashup of Vata and Kapha energies. But some of you, depending on where you live, your winter might be quite different. Maybe you live in Mexico, maybe you live in Russia. Wherever you are on the planet, again, that consideration of what is the climate, what is the quality of the energy outside. Is it heavy, damp? Is it light and bright? Is it windy? Is there a lot of mobility there? All of this too will affect your nervous system. It will affect your energy body. It will affect your mental and emotional bodies. So you want to consider not only the time of day, the time of year, but the climate that you are in, the region that you are in. Maybe you're at high elevation, maybe you're at low elevation, at sea level. So taking into consideration all of these subtle elements is going to fine-tune you, it's going to fine-tune your practice, and it's going to really invite your students into a deeper listening, a deeper attentiveness as they start to understand why you're teaching what you're teaching, and in what form are you teaching what you're teaching, not just this posture, that posture, this breathing practice, that breathing practice, but that there is truly some consideration behind it, some understanding of the alchemy. And I really believe that our yoga practice is alchemical. In Ayurveda, we talk about, foods and how we cook the food and what herbs and spices. That's the alchemical process. So it's not black or white. And I really feel Ayurveda gets a bad rap for being kind of rulesy, and it's not. It's about deepening our sensitivity and awareness to what's going on moment to moment, internally and externally, and then being guided by and from the internal wisdom around that, the wisdom of nature. Ayurveda was, I was going to say designed, but it was downloaded essentially through experience and through deep listening of the rishis, of the seers. Thousands of years ago, they sat in and with nature and observed it. We're too busy to do that, most of us, right? We're too busy to sit still for 3 years and observe the animals and nature, but we can do it a little bit in our own ways. And this is what's great about Ayurveda, that we go, okay, the kind of groundwork, the legwork has been done. So we understand these principles now. We don't have to experience them to understand them, but we have to also experience them to understand them and make them real. So that goes out of concept into embodiment. And that is really my hope for all of us as yoga teachers, as healers, as humans, is that it goes out of, oh, I get that. Oh, I've heard this all before. Oh, I understand Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Doesn't matter until we embody it, until it really makes an impact in our life. Does that make sense? That we don't need more information. I really believe that. We are so cluttered with information, and the wounded ego will grasp and want more and more information. And it will behoove us to slow down and to sit in the discomfort sometimes of the stillness, of the pause, to not do, so that we can really see what energy is behind our choices, is behind our motivation and intention. So for this example, we're talking about creating our yoga classes. Why do I teach the way that I teach? And does it need to shift? Does it need to change? Hopefully, yes, at certain phases of your life, it will change. I'm not the yoga teacher I was 20 years ago, or even last year. And I don't want to be the same yoga teacher that I am today in a year from now. I don't want to know what I teach or who I am to such a degree that I get stuck there. I want to continue to listen to the impulses and the guidance of divinity. I want to stay so connected to myself that the channel becomes really clear for the ones that I serve, whether they be my students, clients that I work with one-on-one. And I think as yoga teachers, it can be very difficult because there's so much noise out there. And I've spoken to so many yoga teachers who don't even have a home practice. And if that's you, it's not a judgment. It's just, I want to highlight the disconnect in that it's something that to really get curious about what's going on there. If we are teaching, but not practicing ourselves, what needs tending to inside of ourselves so that we can deepen our own understanding and connection instead of just, oh, I teach yoga, but I don't actually have a home practice. I don't actually practice myself. And I'm not speaking specifically of asana. Okay, we can have very different practices depending on what is required. Your practice might be working right now in one of my mentorship programs with tree puja, which is this nature meditation, this nature puja to a specific tree or plant in one's home, and the dedicated communion with that. So it doesn't have to look like, oh, I get up and I do 30 minutes on my mat. That's not necessarily the practice, but we have to be invested in our commitment to ourself, to our own self study, swadhyaya, right? We call that in yoga. So just to reiterate, 5 things to continue, if you're already like, yeah, I know that, to deepen in, to refine, or some of this might be brand new to some of you, that's okay. We want to consider the end quality that we're leaving the practice or the class with, the state. What is the state of the nervous system, and how are each of the postures and practices and pranayama practices affecting the nervous system? We want to consider the time of day, the time of year, and the climate which we're in. Those 5 things are important to design our own practice or our class in a more skillful way. So just take a breath in. Just notice how all that settles with you. Consider your current practice or maybe lack of practice. Consider your current classes. What could be shifted, refined? It might be just a little tweak. It might be understanding how to use certain pranayama to balance out the nervous system. Okay, I'm going to start out the class using Bhastrika or Kapalabhati to get the energy going, but I want to leave the students with Nadi Shodhan, with alternate nostril breathing to balance those hemispheres of the brain, to smooth out the quality of prana. And like this, we can skillfully adjust. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share for today, that insight into the Ayurvedic approach, or a Ayurvedic approach. That's just, we're skimming the surface here, right? There's so much depth to these ancient sciences, but I hope and intend that there's some value in that you have something from today to take away that you can begin to use and incorporate. I've had some questions come in about the upcoming 100-hour online training. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that right now, and then I'll open up our call for any kind of questions that you have about the content from today, about the training, anything at all that you want to ask me regarding Ayurveda is completely appropriate. So the 100-hour training was originally an in-person training. It is shifted and changed and transformed. It is an experience for yoga teachers and dedicated students of yoga. And what I mean by that are people that have been practicing yoga at least 5 years and are committed to learning more about Ayurveda. They don't necessarily want to do anything with Ayurveda beyond their own self-care and healing and their own understanding. So there's two kind of camps and both are welcome in this. The reason that I ask that people are dedicated students of yoga or that have 5 years of practice under their belt is because I'm not going to go back to the basics. I'm not going to go back and teach alternate nostril breathing, for example. I'm not going to go back and teach Uddiyana Bandha, for example. We're just going to move from a certain degree of wisdom and knowledge so that we can dive in and go deeper together. So I'm just looking at the questions here. So one of the questions that came through is, what certification will I get? So this, as you may or may not know, Yoga Alliance is a governing body, or sorry, is not a governing body, it's a registry. Often in the West, we think that Yoga Alliance is some kind of status, and many people have bought into this, and we have our pay our dues to get our little initials from Yoga Alliance, which is great, that's fine. I'm accredited under Yoga Alliance as I forget what the acronym is, as one of their continuing education providers. You will get 100 hours towards your CEUs. I believe that stands for your continuing education credits with Yoga Alliance. So that's what you can use this certification for if you've completed all components of the course, if you go through and do your practicum. If you're not a yoga teacher, then you can absolutely take the course, but you won't do the practicum portion of the training. That's just because you're not already a certified yoga teacher. If you can't make it live, that was a question. What if I can't make it live to the live calls, which are on Wednesday starting April 14th at 9 a.m. The last live call is June 23rd. And you receive all of the replays. I have had students go through the course before that haven't been able to come to any of the live classes. It's not ideal, but it's also fine. I've got students that are signed up from Hong Kong or from Europe or Australia that the time zones don't mesh up. So they're not able to come live. You're always able to send in your questions that will get answered in the class so that you can still participate even though you can't be there live. And then all of the resources, the replays of the classes, and all of the content from each module is stored in, it's called the portal, a separate website where you can log in and get all of your modules to go through. And that content in the portal is there indefinitely. And that's one of the positives of online learning is you can go back to it. It's not just like a live class where if you didn't get the note or if you missed what I had said, it's lost forever. You can go back and rewatch the videos. You can rewatch or listen to some of the audios, and you have PDF handouts from every module as well. I'm just going to share with you my screen to talk briefly about the breakdown of the modules so that you can understand what you'll be getting in the course. I have some questions come in about, like, I've studied some Ayurveda, will I learn more? Will this be a deepening for me? My belief and my experience is that I can always learn more about Ayurveda. It's endless, it's phenomenal. And I'm also happy to hear things in different ways from different people. So module 1, we're looking at history and philosophy, the 3 pillars of disease, the Pancha Mahabhutas, which is the 5-element theory, and going deeply into the 20 attributes, which are the gunas. That's what I spoke about, the 10 pairs of opposites, or the hot, cold, heavy, light, and then Prakriti versus Vikruti, which is our original constitution and current state, which is very confusing for most people when they are trying to learn Ayurveda. And this is all on my website, by the way, so you can go back to this if you're interested again. In module 2, we go deeper into Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. We look at, or you get to look at your own personal doshic makeup. And then we dive into the 15 subdoshas. So there are 15 subdoshas for Vata, 5 for Vata, 5 for Pitta, 5 for Kapha. We get more refined in our understanding of how these energies express specifically physiologically in the body. It's fascinating. So most people know Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Most people don't know that there's 15 ways that we break down each of these energies and look at them more specifically. We look at the fascinating disease process and various stages of disease, because the truth is we don't get sick overnight. We don't just wake up with cancer. We don't just wake up with arthritis. There's 6 phases and stages of a disease process where things accumulate and proliferate and move out into the system. Module 3, we look at the application of dinacharya. We look at tongue diagnosis, not so that we're diagnosing people with their tongues, but that we can look at our own tongue, our own health, and understand the information that there's a whole map of our organ system right on our tongues. It's so cool. So it's amazing when we see that our entire body, we have face analysis that we get into. Every line on our face is related to an organ. It's so brilliant this organism that we're living in. Module 4, food, nutrition, and sacred consumption, again, from the Ayurvedic perspective of the 6 tastes, of mindful eating, of how we work with rasa, virya, and vipak, the heating potency, the taste, and the post-digestive effect. Module 5 is where we focus on the Ayurvedic yoga practice, how we can shift and refine our yoga practice and our yoga classes in a more skillful way, which we touched upon briefly today. Deepening into Ayurveda. So this is where it gets pretty fascinating. We realize that there's these 7 dhatus, we've got these channels, we've got subtle expressions of the doshas, which are the energies of prana, tejas, and ojas. And then we have gunas. You might have studied this in your yoga teacher training and heard these words of sattva, rajas, and tamas. Okay, so we'll go deeper into those from the Ayurvedic philosophy. One of my favorite modules is the subtle body anatomy. This is the chakra system, the koshas, understanding the nadis and how to regulate the nervous system. Such juicy stuff. Module 8, self-mastery. This is where we look inwards and see where our own limiting perceptions and beliefs are causing disturbance, dis-ease, symptoms in our life, and how we can start to redirect the flow of that prana to feel more whole day to day. Module 9, we look at how to work one-on-one with students. So those of you who are yoga teachers, those of you who aren't, you'll still love following some of the case studies and looking at how we speak to people and find out more information to create a really stellar yoga program for someone individually or for your own self. And then module 10 is the integration and embodiment. There's a module on the topic of the business of yoga, some practical things to do in the world of yoga for yoga teachers and working for ourselves, which we all are, even if we're at one studio or a bunch of different studios. And then how to move forward with grace, ease, and confidence. So that's the overview, just quickly. And again, you can always go back to that of the 100-hour program. Any other questions that came through? No, I think that's good, unless any of you have questions about that now. Some of you might not be into that at all. You might still want to learn more about Ayurveda, but not in that degree, not 100 hours. If that's you, I have a 7-module online course called Ayurveda for Real Life. That can be found on my website. That is a go at your own pace audio course with downloadable PDFs, 7 modules to really give you a great foundation in Ayurveda. If you're joining me for the 100-hour training, that Ayurveda for Real Life class is included. That program is included, and it is the prerequisite so that you go through those 7 modules before we meet April 14th for our first class. That way, everybody comes in together, because maybe you've studied Ayurveda here or read a book there, but that we've all gone through the same 7-module preparation to get the foundation, so that when we start the program and go into the live classes together, we can go a little bit deeper than having to go back to all of the basics. So it gets us speaking in the same language right out of the gate. 2 other ways, if you're like, I'm just wanting something to support me, this is the book that my colleague and I wrote called Your Irresistible Life. It's on Amazon. It's a great resource to guide you through yoga and Ayurveda through the seasonal approach. It's got recipes, it's got self-care recipes, it's got meditations and yoga practices and food programs all in there. And the other thing coming up is next week, the 24th, I think I'll send you an email, an Ayurveda for Spring masterclass. It will be 2 hours long. If you can't make it live, you will receive the replay. It's by sliding scale, and you'll also receive an Ayurveda yoga class based on pacifying kapha. So for the springtime as well with that masterclass program. So that's Ayurveda for Spring. So there's 4 ways, depending on where you're at, your commitment level, what you're wanting to learn about Ayurveda, whether it's just a little bit, whether you think just want to join a 2-hour masterclass and learn how I can keep myself healthy for spring with my food, with essential oils, with yoga, all of that. Or if you're like, I really want to dive deeper and invest some time and energy and finances into my Ayurvedic training in a 100-hour program. Okay, I've spoken enough. So do you have any questions either about what I spoke about in our content today or about the upcoming program, any of the trainings or ways that you can learn more about Ayurveda? If so, please go ahead and just unmute yourself. Let me know your name and ask your question. Oh, I see some people with their hands up. Oh, I see. Sorry. I have to ask you to unmute. Okay, Monica? Can you hear me, Monica?
Yes, I can. Hi. Sorry.
Hi.
I was just having a snack when I was listening to you, so I turned my video off.
Totally get it.
So just 2 questions. The training, the live calls, how long are those? Like, are they like 2 hours long, the whole day? Like, is there reading beforehand? Like, how does that work?
Great question. So each week is dedicated to one of the modules. So there's 10 modules, there's 10 live classes, and halfway through, so we've got 5 weeks, and then we have a reading break, and then 5 more weeks of class. The first and last classes are 1 hour and 45 minutes, because there's a little more to do first and last day. And the other classes in between are 90 minutes. So from 9 a.m. to 10:30 Pacific time, that's Vancouver, LA time.
Okay, and then I just had one more question.
Please.
Just for those of us who are teaching in studios, like the studios and the students always kind of want everything to stay consistent, right? So they can keep the same schedule. But so I teach on Sundays, like a gentle hatha class, and then I teach at 4 o'clock a yin restorative class. Okay. So, they want to keep the same sort of schedule, but I'm trying to keep in mind like seasonal changes and things like that too. So I appreciate how you said like, change your approach if the class stays the same. I just miss sort of the details of how you said to do that.
That could be done in a lot of different ways. So what I'm hearing is, okay, I'm working for studio. They want some consistency so people know if I'm coming to that time of class, what I'm going to get. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I get that. So I feel that part of our role as yoga teachers is to re-educate people. And it can be subtle. You don't have to switch the class 180. It doesn't have to be a big drastic change, but it could be something like bringing in a pranayama practice that is going to be helpful for spring, or moving through the asana a little faster to stimulate more energy, for example. Whereas maybe in the fall, when the energy is lower, you're going to have a more restorative approach. So it should change slowly enough, like you're warming up water in the bath slowly enough that it just gradually shifts, just like the seasons do. The seasons are gradually shifting day to day. We don't really just wake up one day. It feels like that sometimes, like, oh, just spring is here. But if we paid closer attention, we'd see the weeks and days before the buds were starting to come up, and then it takes time for those flowers to bloom. So I would suggest the slow shift and the education of the students of this is why we're doing this. Because when we empower our students with the understanding of why we're making the choices we are, they can get behind it easier. And so what you're doing, your role as a yoga teacher, is to track energy. You're tracking the seasonal time of day, all of that energy, and you're tracking the energy of the student. So you show up right? You show up to a class, maybe you have a class plan that is to get things moving, and you come in and the energy is just like exhaustion. You're going to adjust. You're
Right.
going to read the tone of the collective nervous system. Yeah. Is that helpful, Monica?
Yeah, it is. I do some stand-up paddleboard classes in the summer too.
Okay.
Well, generally kind of like spring to summer. And I noticed that depending on, depending on the heat, and also, keeping in mind that we're on the water, which is fairly cooling. And then if there's wind involved, it's all these things that I'm taking into consideration anyway. And then if it's like early in the summer or like deep in the summer, like the classes do slightly change. So your book is amazing. It's been super helpful. I just finished my first like spring, what I would call a quasi cleanse, because I didn't do 21 days, I did 7 days. So,
beautiful.
and it's just like, like you said, learning yourself a little bit at a time and being kind of graceful with your own knowledge. So just thank you. It's been really helpful to me.
You're so welcome. Yeah, and feel free to reach out if you have any more questions. Just pop me an email. Okay, Elaine, I see you have your hand up. You're unmuted, or you're able to unmute.
Can you hear me?
I can. Hi.
Hi, thank you for this.
You're welcome.
You said something very early on, and that's what I have a question about. It was, I think, a relative talked to you, maybe with a heart condition, and you said, well, do this, stop eating ice cream. And I think maybe she was an angry person, or I don't remember exactly. So what I'm interested in is you gave something very clear in a direction, and why you chose those things. Because let's say you have, well, you're very Vata, and I could do this, or I could do this, or I could do this, and yet you took something very clear that can be done, or maybe can't, or be very difficult to be done because it's an ingrained habit. So I'm curious, is how do you make that sort of clear top level? Don't do 20 things, do one thing, do two things, but what are those one or two things?
So love your question, Elaine. I love your mind and curiosity in that way. Here's the answer to everything in Ayurveda. So the answer is, to any question, is it depends.
Okay.
So there is no blanket statement. This is what I love about Ayurveda, and can also make it challenging for especially beginners to learn, because our Western conditioned mind wants to just tell me what the answer is, or tell me what to do. So with that specific example, which is a little bit funny, and it's just because my relationship with that relative is a little bit funny in that way of like, okay, I know that stop complaining and stop binge eating ice cream are the things that they needed to hear.
Yeah.
As almost like, start with that. Let's see if there's any willingness to look at either of those things. That's not the kind of recommendation that I would necessarily give to a client.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's why working with family is usually a bad idea, because it's very different, right? We have these different relationships. So if I'm working with a client, I'm going to be listening for Vikruti. Vikruti is the current state. Where are they most out of balance? And we're working retroactively. So we look at, it's not as important to understand what the Prakruti is, what the original nature is, as it is to understand what is the current state of imbalance, and what things, foods, lifestyle, yoga, meditation, pranayama, what practices am I recommending to start to bring that current state of imbalance back into balance, back into alignment with Prakruti. So we want to start with the current state that is out of balance and make our recommendations from there. What I have found over the years, so I'm getting blinded with the sun here, just shift. What I found over the years is that less is more. Giving one or two things, so it might be to the new person to Ayurveda, scrape your tongue. Do that every morning. It takes 10 seconds. Scrape your tongue every day for a week, and have warm water first thing, or room temperature water, depending on the time of year. Do that. And then you'll see, are they invested enough to do the minimum, right? Two things that take like a minute out of their day. If not, you're probably not going to get much traction with them. And then we have the keeners that come in, usually the super Pitta types or the high strung Vata types who want to take it all on. And that can be difficult too, because often people will start off really strong. And then if we give them too many recommendations, or if they try to change too many things at once, they'll hit a plateau, or they'll hit a wall and they'll just kind of drop it all, or collapse because it's too much. I really like the slow, organic, woven in, sustainable approach, so that we don't hit that wall and turn into like the teenager and have our rebellion phase of, screw Ayurveda, or this doesn't work, or this is too much work, or this is, changing my life too much, taking too much out of my schedule. So depends on the personality, depends on the symptom or disease. For some things, we need to be very, or a lot more rigid, and a lot more committed to the transformation than people that are working in more of a space of refining their health. So it truly is, the answer is, it depends.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is that
A lot
helpful?
of sense. Yes, it does. It makes a lot of sense. I think it's interesting though, because if it is a member of the family, then you already know a lot about them. So it's not glib. It's, I mean, you really have done kind of an evaluation in a way. So
Unfortunately, yes.
because I'm also just like, if you start doing those things, not getting obsessive about it, but can you have a kind of crisis by changing something that's like the vicarity, like you're in some sort of a state, and you start doing these things and you kind of don't recognize yourself, or is that being extreme? Or
Are you talking about like a mental emotional level, or like a physical, like healing crisis? I'm not clear.
or I guess I'm just wondering, like, so these changes would be kind of gradual inside, and that's what you would hope for. You're not going for like changing something radically. It's because you have to integrate the changes, I suppose.
Again, it really depends on the personality and character of the individual. Typically what we would say, like broad strokes, is for kapha, we really need to motivate people with a kapha imbalance, because their tendency is to be more sluggish, to be more procrastinate, or stay stuck. So that kind of motivation is going to be more important for kapha vikruti, for example. Whereas someone like vata, we might need to contain the energy in a much greater way. Instead of inspiring and invigorating,
Right,
we need to actually kind of ground and bring it in. So we might even have them do less things in a day,
yeah,
and be more specific, for example.
great example of it depends.
I know,
Thank you.
it's such a interesting answer, and it's really true. And it's kind of
Yeah.
cool because we get to look at each individual case and say, case by case, what is really going to be the best thing for that individual, depending on their whole life history, depending on where they're at physically, mentally, emotionally, energetic, spiritually. All of it matters. And it's really beautiful when we get to work with ourselves to that degree of attention and care of what is in my highest and best right now. Not what is right, not what is right for other people or other people's path, but what is right for me, for my health and healing and growth in this very moment.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Great questions. All right. Any other questions or comments? I see some thanks here in the comments. So you're welcome, Claire. You're welcome, Herta. I answered the call about how long the live calls are. Manjeet, what is Tree Puja? Tree Puja is something that I was invited into in an ashram for 6 months. I studied and lived at the Bihar School of Yoga, and we were introduced to Tree Puja, which was essentially a time of day that we were all, I was going to say invited, we were told to go find a tree, be with this tree. It was kind of open to what we did with this tree, but we had to go and be with the tree. And so some people lit incense, some people chanted to their tree, some people prayed with their tree, some people did nothing with their tree. It was an opportunity to connect with nature and to be very present to the aliveness of a tree. It was quite a beautiful process. And then one day in the ashram, one guy's tree got cut down. They didn't tell him like it was going to get cut down. So he just came to do his tree puja and his tree was gone. And he was so upset about this and angry. And so it was just interesting, like what comes up around the connection or attachment that we get to things. It was just quite hilarious, really, because random weird things always happen. Like, yeah, all of a sudden you come and your sacred tree is cut down and no one knows why or where or anything. So it's pretty awesome. So that's the tree puja. You can do that on your own with a plant in your home, with a tree in your backyard, but the consistency of going and being in that energy is really powerful in creating a relationship. Hopefully not a codependent one, but creating a relationship with that tree or with the energy of nature starts to change the alchemy inside of us as well. Okay. Monica says, thank you for this. I look forward to taking the masterclass with you. They're always amazing offerings. Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to sharing that next week. I'll send out an email about the Ayurveda for Spring masterclass that you're welcome to join in on. Any other questions or comments? I know we've gone a little bit over time, but I'm happy to answer anything. Kelly, yeah, there you go. Can you unmute yourself? Oops. Oh, I pressed the wrong thing. 1 second. Oh, sorry, okay, here we go. Did that work?
Did that work?
Yes.
Okay, good. I remember my tree from tree puja too.
And how was that for you? Kelly and I both have lived at the same ashram at different times.
Yeah, I liked it. I really liked it. Sometimes it was hard to like fit it into the day. I'm gonna go see my tree today. But in general, it was a really beautiful practice to sit with the same tree and observe it over time. Two things. One, I wanted to just share for anyone else here that I've gone through the training with Melanie and I loved it, and I continue to use it in my classes, both drop in kind of a more subtle way, and then specifically in like a 6-week series or a workshop setting where it's obvious that that's what we're doing. So 6 years later, thank you. And my question is around kapha pacifying practices and classes in the evening. So I'm teaching a series coming up that's kapha pacifying for spring. So I guess if we are only able to practice or teach in the evening and we want it to be kapha reducing, do you have any general suggestions?
Yeah. And so what time?
If I was teaching in the morning.
What time?
7:30 at night.
7:30 till 9?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what I would suggest. And Kelly is a brilliant yoga teacher in Victoria, and it's great to see how she offers these workshops and series with an Ayurvedic focus. It's brilliant. And a lot of the teachers that have been through the 100-hour program go on and do that and create workshops and have a niche for themselves. And Kelly's done that really well. So what I would say in that case, let the first third of the class be kapha pacifying, right? Be more invigorating, be some of those more dynamic postures, because they've already been through the day. They don't need to warm up the joints as much as an early morning class with all the Palamuktasana stuff. So you can kind of move through that faster in the beginning and get to more invigorated movement, and then make sure that the latter half or 2/3 is really working on regulating the nervous system, soothing things, bringing them down so that they can leave in a more vata pacified state is what I would recommend. If they're walking out of there at 9 o'clock, you want them to be ready to step into bed soon.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thank you.
So still keep some of the practices. Maybe you bring that Kapalbhati or Bastrika in at the beginning, clear the day, get things moving, and then really slow it down, move it into a slower, calmer, smoother practice by the end.
That's great.
Does that sound like you could make that work?
Yeah, because I'm going for invigorating and uplifting, and I'm like, like they're going to be all really stimulated. And I was not even sure about doing Kapalbhati. Like I was like, well, maybe just doing Ujjayi, and then, but we'll see. Yeah, I like what you say. The first third or half of it more obviously kapha reducing.
Yeah. So it might be, and I don't know, but knowing you a little bit in your teaching, like you start in a little faster than you might typically,
Yeah.
like that you kind of dive in faster and then orchestrate the flow of energy that the end really smooths and slows things down, so that you don't take as luxurious of that starting settling practice and all of that it starts off a little peppier,
Yeah.
if you will, and then you can really let the juicy, slow groundiness come through the end. But you won't be able to do that if you spend too much time in the beginning. So just think about the beginning being a little more, and then you can really use the end to soften it.
Beautiful.
And let me know how it goes. Let me know how that feels in the teaching of it and in your observation of the students as you start teaching that way.
Awesome.
Yeah, or let me know if you have any other questions that come up too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So good to see you.
Thank you.
Bye, Azalea.
Melanie.
All right. Well, it has been such an honor and pleasure to be here with all of you today. Thank you for your presence. I really hope that you're walking away with some value and things to contemplate and consider in your practice and in your classes. Feel free to reach out if you're interested in having a conversation about the 100-hour program. There's an application on my website at madurimethod.com. And then we'll meet and talk and really see if it's truly a good fit for you at this time, because I always want it to be a good group and to make sure it will really serve you. So reach out, we'll set up time to have a conversation, and I will be sending out more information about next week's Ayurveda for Spring masterclass as well. So thank you so much for being here. Much love. And